Hello and welcome back to the Osceola.com's Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer, recruiting writer for the Osceola.com. Joined today, very briefly, because he's got a lot to do today, head editor Bob Ferrante. And we'll just get right into it. We'll save the pleasantries aside. The breaking news of today, early in the morning, around 8 o'clock this morning, four-star linebacker, number one linebacker per On3 Rivals recruiting rankings, Izayia Williams, surprisingly, out of the blue, flips his commitment from Ole Miss, who he committed to in the dog days of summer during an official visit. He flipped back to Florida State this morning to what will now be his sixth college decision. 5 colleges in total: Syracuse, Louisville, Florida State, Florida, Ole Miss, now back into the fold with Florida State. Counting. We know how to count here at the Osceola, which is good. Bob, as the father of an indecisive 18-year-old, watching the decisions of another seemingly indecisive 18-year-old, where is your mind with what this recruitment does for Florida State? Obviously, now Florida State up to 3 linebacker commitments in this class. You have Karan Maycock. You have the younger brother of Caleb LaValle, Noah LaValle, who committed as well. You got your blue chip linebacker, Bob, but at what cost? This has been a very volatile recruitment, and while you can understand why he would have decommitted from Florida State back when he did in the fall, you just went to a 10. Randy Shannon's about to get the axe. How do you feel about this commitment? How do you feel about this commitment? Where do you land in terms of your excitement level versus your understanding?
There's too much to 15th, the National Signing Day in December, right?
Yes.
I mean, look, on base value, you love this. I mean, you want to get the top prospect at a position or a top 5 prospect at any position. That's obvious. That's a duh. And I don't want to be too critical here because we've seen Florida State land prospects who have flipped a couple times. Like Dalvin Cook, again, remember, was committed in some order to Clemson or Florida first before coming to Florida State. This is not highly unusual. This particular prospect, committing, decommitting, flipping, etc., the volume is disconcerting, and also in an era where NIL rev share numbers are being thrown around, you have to wonder what kind of numbers are being thrown at him. What is he weighing and considering? When the big picture, I think, Nick, we've often talked to prospects, and it's all about fit, culture. You like the coaches, you feel like they're going to develop you for the NFL. I think a lot of guys are still picking schools based on, can I have a good 3 to 4 years, and then can I get to the NFL? So without knowing all of Izayya's process, you hope that it sticks. But again, a lot of real estate days between August 15th and December.
And things get complicated really quickly. He did this morning, I think, in fact, because I called him on the phone. He just got out of major knee surgery. He's got a knee injury that he just had surgery for. He's going to be out his entire senior year, Bob. So that's another wrinkle that gets thrown into this. And there's also the wrinkle of, okay, well, you have other blue chip linebackers that you were in on, Rodney Colton Jr., DQ Forkba, those guys. How does this recruitment affect those? It may not affect the recruitment whatsoever, but you would think that you probably have to cool off a little bit, or the odds are is that one of them probably doesn't feel as good about Florida State now that there's another person lining up or committed to play a position that they are likely going to play. I think they have a lot of Mike linebackers that's the position that they're primarily trying to fill. So there's a lot in play here for sure in terms of how this recruitment affects things moving forward, as well as kind of just the elephant in the room. It is a stormy cloud that, unfortunately, with the past being what it be, is going to hover over this recruitment in terms of Could he potentially go somewhere else? I mean, we're up to we're up to 6 commitments, 5 different schools, 3 shutting downs, and I don't know, a Klondike bar somewhere thrown in there. It really is one of those recruitments that's been all over the place. It's a great get for Florida State. If you're looking for the silver lining here, despite kind of the pessimistic or kind of cautious, kind of tone that we're giving off here, the silver lining is this is a kid with a lot of potential. This kid is one of the best linebackers in the state, one of the best linebackers in the country. If Florida State is able to hold on to this kid, Izayia, he is going to be one heck of a football player. And of course, then it goes into, well, you got to keep him on campus once you get there. Let's get the positives out of the way. Let's get the positive juices flowing here. It's a great get for Florida State, but at what potential cost? Because if you find yourself in a situation where Izayia does decommit down the road and you've cooled off on some of these other linebacker targets that you've been targeting, you're kind of pushing all of your chips into the middle of the table here. So Izayia Williams flipping back to Florida State this morning. Florida State did suffer a decommitment yesterday with James Tank Carrington decommitting almost as out of the blue as Izayia Williams' commitment was. Tank, obviously, we've talked about him on the show before. Further back, is a kid that has had an almost like 2 separate recruitments, Bob. You have the early recruitment where he's considered a 5-star prospect out of his freshman year of high school. You love what you see on the film from Tank. He didn't necessarily grow into what a lot of people projected him to be. That and moving multiple high schools kind of raised a lot of red flags and caused some schools to back off a little bit, to where when Florida State came in along with Nebraska during the summer, this was a fairly uncontested recruiting win for Florida State. Now Carrington is decommitted. It looks like Oklahoma is the team that is now going to be getting his services. I don't know what your opinions were on the potential of Carrington when he first signed, Bob, or not signed rather, but committed. But how does this decommitment impact your view of Terrence Knighton's defensive line class?
Yeah, I guess in this era, again, I don't get super caught up in a decommitment in August. It is significant, again, because like to your point, how does a commitment or a decommitment impact other prospects' decisions as they're weighing, potential size of a class, potential depth chart. So I think because Florida State has 4 other defensive line commits in this class, I don't view this as a huge loss just because you already have numbers. Say you're the leader in the clubhouse to land 4, give or take, defensive linemen.
I think Tank was the 4th. I think it's okay. Whitley, it's Ernest Rankins, it's Tico Crittenden, and I think Tank would have been the 4th. So I think you're sitting at 3 right now. So yeah, again, you don't want to lose guys, but in the big picture, you've still done your job. I think we talked about this, some in July, early August. Did Florida State coaches do enough on the recruiting trail to build the relationships to then close through these official visits in the summer? And our viewpoint then was, yes, I think except for edge defender, offensive tackle, yes, there's always going to be holes in a class in July and August. And there's still holes in the class now and probably will be in September. But I'm kind of a big picture recruiting guy, whereas you cover the day-to-day. I guess I view the big picture as being favorable. Still work to do. And again, get those wins on the football field, look good on offense and defense. And you're going to lock up a significant chunk of these commitments and make them signees in December. And I think the thing to know about Carrington is that he just signed with a new agency, a new player representative agency, about 2 weeks ago. So it's hard to view it another way, but one potential way to look at this is that this new agency came in, maybe up the price with Florida State. The other thing that I mentioned on a recruiting podcast that we're going to be teaming with Warchain on this one that's going to be launching today, by the way. So definitely go and listen to it. If you're a recruiting sicko and you want to get more of this recruiting info, make sure that you tune into that. Of course, we'll link that on the Osceola.com and the YouTube page as well. But one of the things that could also potentially be happening is the fact that just like Florida State is kind of evaluating where their board is and going after other guys, extending out offers, looking to fill holes that they weren't able to fill in the summer, Florida State is obviously not the only football program out there. I mean, there's 134 FBS teams. There are going to be people that are going to be trying to fill holes, upping their offers to other prospects. As I kind of alleged or alluded to rather earlier on, this was a relatively uncontested commitment win for Florida State earlier in the cycle. Who's to say that other programs, and again, it's looking like it's Oklahoma right now, don't come back and say, hey, we're still interested. We're going to give you more than what Florida State is giving you. And at that point, like it's going to be hard to say no. So that's certainly something to weigh.
Yeah. And if this is about money, if this is about offers, counter offers, et cetera, a couple things to keep in mind. Oklahoma, their GM is Jim Nagy with NFL front office experience. He was at the Senior Bowl. This is a man who is highly respected around the football community for his player evaluation. Now, it's different to evaluate high school prospects than college, given across the board. But if Oklahoma's after him, that shows you he's a high quality prospect. From the money end, from the Mike Norvell discussion, when somebody, either prospect, mom, dad, agency, goes to Mike Norvell and says, hey, coach, we'd like more money than what we had agreed to or whatnot. Mike Norvell doesn't love that when a high school prospect is trying to up the number. Now, when a current college player, and we're talking about player retention, say he's all conference or say he's a valuable person, you're locking him up for 25 and now thinking about 26 down the road. Mike Norvell is probably going to find some money here and there, move some of the dollar bills around in the bucket of the budget for his guy. He's all about talent retention. I don't think he's in that game with the high school prospects of getting into, I won't say he won't get into bidding wars because they clearly did, for example, with Usman Kroma, but I don't think he wants to be in this game with every single prospect that's on the board.
Yeah, Mike wants to pick his battles, for lack of a better term.
Very good, yes.
You wants to really make sure that the guys that he is prioritizing with the budget that he has is somebody that he knows is going to willingly contribute and be a guy that can make an impact at Florida State, like an Usman Kroma. And he has made an impact even without seeing the football field, it seems like, in terms of what he's been able to do for this offense. Of course, a great offer right now to join the Osceola.com if you haven't done so already. 30% off right now for an annual subscription. And with that annual subscription, you also get a $25 voucher for, or rather an Alumni Hall card to buy Florida State merchandise at Alumni Hall. Of course, thank you to Alumni Hall, who's been a longtime sponsor of not only Osceola, but this show in particular. Again, 30% off for that annual subscription to theosceola.com, plus a $25 voucher for Alumni Hall. Bob, probably getting to the news on the actual team. The recruiting is done. The news that everybody wants to talk about in terms of players that are on the team. Conrad Hussey, third-year safety for Florida State, dismissed from the program earlier this week. Where's your head at with this? Maybe go into a little bit later on the actual information as to what transpired and how it transpired, but your immediate reaction to Conrad being dismissed from the team, and where does this leave Florida State safety room?
Very much this feels related, not a coincidence, to what Tony White was saying on Monday in his press conference when he not just fielded one question, but I think consistently the tone was he was unhappy with certain players without naming them again. But to have this happen the next day, he's off the team on Tuesday. Mike Norvell confirming on Wednesday that he and the coaching staff dismissed Conrad. So bummer that this happened, obviously, because if you get the 2023 Conrad Hussey, the guy who is disruptive and forces takeaways, that's a good player to have. This was a blue chip prospect. Flip side is, if Conrad is the 2024 version, if there are, let's say, relationship issues, attitude issues, unhappiness with the depth chart, then you start to have questions about, is Conrad the team guy within the room? So I hate to speculate, right? In the absence of information, there's going to be speculation, rumors, etc. It didn't feel like it was working out. And I think for Mike Norvell to make this decision, and it comes across his desk, whether it was recommended by another coach or not, it comes to Mike Norvell to make that decision as the CEO, right? To say, Conrad, thank you, but that's it. I'm curious what you think about the safety room. I don't feel, I'm not losing sleep over the loss of Conrad Hussey, although he would have provided, I think, good depth if he were, say, 2 or 3 on the depth chart. What do you think?
I think he absolutely has already been passed on the depth chart. I think in terms of what you're looking at safety, you're looking at Edwin Joseph. They really like what they've seen from KJ Kirkland this spring. And you're, of course, looking at Earl Little, who has been mentioned in damn near every single press conference that's been held not this spring, but this fall. In terms of Conrad leaving, the rumor and the speculation is that it was an altercation with a coach during a practice that what sent Conrad out of here. I have heard that to be true. We're not going to name the coach's name, but there was an altercation in which Hussey and that coach got into a physical altercation that forced Conrad to be off the team. And obviously, when you hear that, it makes complete sense why it was not a. There are dismissals, Bob, and there are dismissals. There's thank you so much for everything that you've done for our program. We valued our time with you. And then there's thank you for your time. He's gone, which is kind of the tone of the latter of which Norvell gave us on Wednesday when he was asked about it. I don't think that I'm kind of with you. I don't lose sleep about where Florida State's safety room is now. Conrad was passed on the depth chart because of the maturity issues that he has shown last season. And I think that is something important. And it's something that's actually recalling in my mind. When we spoke with Evan Cooper earlier this preseason, you could tell who's had a good offseason and who has had a bad offseason by how the coaches talk about them. When the players have had a good offseason, it's they've put in the work, they look great, they've done a great job this summer and this spring, they've really developed, whatever jargon and coach speak you want to use. The coach speak and the jargon that was used about Conrad Hussey was, mentally Conrad is good. That is such a distinct departure from what you want to be hearing about the development of the other defensive backs, that when I heard that from Coach Evan Cooper, that immediately kind of pinged in my brain. Conrad might not be a part of this team all that much. Like, he might be your top reserve, but Conrad isn't exactly returning to the form that, to your point, we saw in 2023. This feels like, even with the new coaching staff, it might be more 2024 Conrad Hussey. And now with him being completely dismissed from the team, Bob, it seems like 2024 Conrad Hussey was the version of Conrad Hussey that we might have been getting.
And I think of player progression. And if you show something as a freshman, man, the optimism about your second year, years ago, we talked about the second year surge. We were all kind of looking, who's that second year surge type of guy? So I've always liked that term. And then by the third year, it's, I know what I'm doing, I'm confident, I'm comfortable. Yes, it's a new scheme. Yes, it's a new coaching staff, but there's still enough familiarity in the room where you're a veteran. Show up, do your job. You know how to train, you know how to prepare, work out, be ready. And to that point, the tea leaves are there. And if a coach is using coded language or whatever we want to call it, it speaks volumes. So again, some questions about depth, just because you don't have as many pieces with experience. Hey, is Shyheim Brown gonna be an impactful guy as a starter, as a backup? Liked a lot of what we saw from Shyheim. I think 22, 23, some regression in 24. Do you get the best of Shyheim Brown with him knowing this is his last go around? So I think you've got enough competition in a lot of these rooms too. We've hit on that as a storyline, that this camp, there's enough competition that where the puppies are challenging the big dogs. And if the big dogs don't have the fight and not willing to put in the work or to be physical and really bring it, I will question how much Tony White will throw some puppies out there at times, but competition is the stick to work harder, and you gotta go get it. I think that's the storyline across a lot of these positions too, but especially feels like some of the DB room was called out there.
Yeah, I think Shyheim now has weight back on his shoulders again. I think the way that I think about it is that there's kind of two tiers. There's your three starting safeties. We think it's Edwin, KJ Kirkland, Earl Little. Then you have your top reserves, which I would have considered Shyheim Brown, Conrad Hussey. Then you have some of your younger pups that may be working in and out of safety. the defense is so versatile and flexible. They're cross-training all the time. Could it be Kai Bates? Could it be a Zay Thomas a year or so down the road? Probably not Zay, but because he got here in the summer, there's a little bit of a leap in development there. Charles Lester, although they like him more at boundary corner. Like there's a lot of cross-training there. There's a lot of ability to switch to safety potentially. It kind of goes back to the conversation, well, what does this do to Florida State safety room? And I think the general answer when talking to you is that not a lot. I mean, it does do something, but does it actually change anything more than just not having an extra guy there? Not really. I do think that this adds more responsibility on Shaheem's plate, and he's going to have to step up. And I do think that he is probably one of the ones, along with maybe some of the members of the defensive line. I don't think it was Daryl Jackson, as we talked last show, but maybe some guys like a KJ Sanson, like a Daniel Lyons, like a Blake Nicholson, like some of these third-year guys that should be taking that next step forward. And Tony White, speaking directly to them, those are the guys that need to be taking a step up. Now with Conrad gone, Shaheem definitely needs to be, if he's not going to be starting, he needs to be that veteran old head, that top reserve that can be able to coach some of these guys that have leapfrogged him, for lack of a better term. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, this could be Shai's big year. I mean, really, it's his money year as far as the NFL. It's his year, yes, to reclaim the what we put on film last year with the record, with the performance, isn't who we are. I'd also throw Ash Barker out there. Ash is a guy we haven't heard a ton about, but his name's been thrown out there again as someone who hasn't played a ton, maybe in the ballpark of 100 or so snaps last year. But like to your point, there are some options. I think there's leadership in the room too now, especially Jerry Wilson. He wants to go by Jerry, not Jeremiah, but Jerry Wilson's charisma, love of football, to me, that's leadership. Earl Little, not the most vocal guy, but there's leadership there. I think I feel better about the leadership in that room and the potential for some of those older guys setting a tone. But this team is better, honestly, if Shaheem Brown wants to be a thumper, wants to be a guy who can really stick his head in there and make tackles. He's shown it. He's also shown that at times he's not been it. It's one of those wild cards, and it's a weird wild card to have about a guy who's been on campus so long. But again, I think you're better if Shaheem Brown is that type of impactful guy in 2025.
Just a closing thought here and a question I want to extend to you. Do you think that this allows Mike Norvell and to a lesser extent Tony White to send a message to his football team? I mean, let's get this straight. There is no world in which you swing on a coach, which is reportedly what happened. There's no reason why you remain on the team if that's the case. You have to dismiss him, similar to a Jaylen Brown dismissal, where earlier that's a trouble with the law. You have to take action there for if you're Mike Norvell. Is there any, I guess, way that there's an implication here to where this affects the team in another way in which maybe mentally, emotionally, you get more out of them? Or is this kind of just another day, move on? This happened. Let's lock in, refocus in on the task at hand.
I would argue if you feel like you have leaders on the team and you go to those leaders, whether you have a leadership council or not, as a coach, you can go to guys and say, talk to me about Conrad, or talk to me about anybody else. How do you feel about him? Are there issues? How can we help him? And if you feel like you've done everything, literally, if you feel like you've done everything and there's still an issue, then I think you have to understand it's best for the big picture, for the 105 guys on the roster, to move on. And I think this was probably not a decision made lightly. I do think Mike Norvell probably went to Gus Malzahn, Chris Thompson, Tony White. I think he went through the room. A lot of head coaches on this staff, right? Guys like Zach Arnett, Rick Stockstill. A lot of people you can say, you guys have dealt with this kind of thing in your programs too. Talk to me about what you've done, what you've experienced. I don't think this was a Monday or Tuesday discussion. I think they've been having discussions about Conrad and maybe some other guys, right, throughout spring, summer, preseason camp. So we've talked about CEO Mike Norvell, and I think he's assembled a staff where he can look to those guys for advice about how to handle these off-field issues. And Mike Norvell might have been very much leaning in one direction of removing Conrad, but I think he gets that confirmation or that maybe contrarian view too. But again, in the end, I think this is based on what's being discussed. You don't want that type of issue to percolate September, October into November and really be an issue as the season goes on and you're dealing with the week to week of game prep.
Yeah. One bad apple out of the program is better than just keeping it there and letting it rot for sure. Conrad Hussey dismissed from Florida State football earlier this week. Tank Carrington decommitting yesterday, and then Izayia Williams surprisingly flipping back to Florida State this morning. That's going to wrap up a quick hitter Friday show from us at theosceola.com. Remember, 30% off right now for an annual subscription to theosceola.com. There is no better time to join theosceola.com than right now. 2 weeks away, Bob. We're 2 weeks. Wait, is it 2 weeks? I think it is exactly 2 weeks from today or tomorrow.
Saturday. Yep.
Saturday. Time dilation as a beat reporter is actually a real thing, and it should be clinically studied.
Mike Norvell didn't know the day of the week on Wednesday when we talked to him because he kind of paused for a second. So like Tuesday, Wednesday, and then like literally afterwards, we're like, Coach, do you know what day it is? He says, "Is it Wednesday?" It's tough in camp because the days run together.
The days all blur together. It's busy season around here. It's our favorite time of the year. Don't get it twisted. It is busy. It is busy season, and thus the calendar all blurs together. In any event, thank you all so much for watching. Oh, that's right. The 30% off. We almost rabbit trailed off. 30% off for an annual subscription. 2 weeks away from the start of the Florida State football season. With your 30% off, you also get $25 in Alumni Hall card to spend at Alumni Hall for all of your favorite Florida State merchandise, jerseys, hats, glasses, pretty much anything you could ever want in terms of Florida State memorabilia. They have it there at Alumni Hall. Again, thank you to Alumni Hall for sponsoring the show and for being a longtime sponsor of theosceola.com. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer, recruiting writer for theosceola.com. That's Bob Ferrante, the head editor, who's now got to move his daughter into FSU for fall session.
Let's go.
Yeah, enjoy the heat. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your Friday and have a fantastic weekend. We will see you all another time.